Hello and welcome, guys. Welcome to Spellbreak Academy for Mastering Decision Making. I'll be your host today, OSK, and it's great to be here, everybody. Great to be invited on and be able to do this. So I'm just really happy I'm able to provide this for y'all. Quick shout out to Proletariat and Element, respectively. Proletariat for obviously making the game Spellbreak, making such a masterpiece that they do have, and Element for putting on Spellbreak Academy. Both of them are working together to put on these educational videos. So that we can have some good information for y'all so you can improve your game and step up the competition up there in the HoloLens. So definitely go join both of those. I have Element's Discord pinned on the chat, so it'll be the first thing you should see right at the top. And of course, Proletariat's Discord, I can link that as well. We also have Brett in the chat here, one of our mods for Element. He can link the Proletariat Discord as well. And we should have Flossie or Proletariat Andrew in the Spellbreak Discord, and also might be floating around here, so he might be able to help you out as well. But welcome to Mastering Decision Making. Now this is going to be a very complex topic that I actually have a pretty short outline for. Props to Brett for giving me this little outline. I've kind of tweaked it here and there, so we're going to be just talking about all the different things that goes into making decisions here in Spellbreak. And we're going to be, kind of combining elements from previous Spellbreak Academies. If you've ever watched Positioning, if you've watched all of the class Spellbreak Academies from there in the past. Also, we have runes, we have the game modes. This is pretty much an amalgamation of everything, and we're going to be putting it all together. So I really hope that you guys get something out of this, and I really hope that y'all enjoy it. And without further ado, we can go ahead and get in here. So now what I'm going to be doing here in Spellbreak is I'm going to be basically just hopping in on the talent and class. We're going to be hopping into, let's go ahead and get into the practice screen so I can go ahead and just give you a quick little outline of all these here. As you can see, I still have a little bit of progress to make with these 4 classes. But in any case, we're going to start off here. Now, I'm really hoping that you guys are familiar at this point with how Spellbreak plays out. Basically, you drop in, you have your preferred class. You can also have your talents here. Talents are a very, very important part of the game. Very important part of decision making as well as your classes and everything like that. So let's kind of get into the meat of classes here. So whenever you're picking your classes, you want to make sure that you know what exactly you want to do with everything. This is going to be the thing that I circle back to at all times. You want to know what you want to do with everything that you choose. So with your classes, think about what your preferred play style is. Do you prefer to be that up close and personal engagement? Do you prefer the shotgun class, for lack of a better word, for toxicologist, or being an assassin? Do you like keeping people at arm's length like a pyromancer? Do you like having that high flying mobility with Tempest? Do you like being that grounded, almost stationary, but still being able to move, brawler type fighter? Do you like being a long-range sniper, or do you like being kind of a control mage, keeping them at a very, very long arm's distance away? So, you know, whatever your preferred playstyle is, if you come from an FPS background, you're most likely going to pick something like Conduit. If you come from a background like Quake, you might want to pick up Pyromancer, or, you know, if you just like being sneaky and assassin, you might want to pick up some Toxicologist. So just think about what exactly you want to do in the game, and then pick the class to sort of back up that first theory. And of course, you're going to be picking your drop here. I'll go ahead and see if I can't get you a little view of the map here, because viewing your drop is definitely going to be a big part of that. We won't queue into a game. I'll just get to where I can show you the map here. Get into the practice lobby. We'll go ahead and mute real quick. There we go. So whenever you're picking your drop here, you want to think about, now, of course, portals can spawn anywhere that the game decides they want to spawn them in, but you want to be thinking about areas of high traffic, areas of your high dense loot. One area that I'll go ahead and point out right here that's often forgotten, funny enough, Forgotten Cloister, very, very nice drop area. You want to make sure to get as much loot as possible. Forgotten Cloister definitely has 4 epic chests, I believe, as well as quite a good density of loot, so that might be a good area for you to drop in. Dustbowl Hold as well, 2 epic chests right here in the dome, and you can also get all this loot area right up here, and if you look closely enough, it makes a smiley face. Isn't that nice? Shadow Grace, another big one. Fort Halcyon, it encompasses this entire area. Very, very high density of loot. Hemwood and Timberend are becoming more popular. Westmar, always a popular area, along with Arena of Elders. You can get some guaranteed stuff. Banehelm Keep as well. And then Lowland's going to be your last real big one. You can go Bogmore. It has a lot of density kind of in this area, but it's a little bit more spread out than the rest of the areas. And of course, Sawtooth and Ruby. So if you can see here, of course, what's left out, we have Verdant Estate, Wickgrave, Lux Vault, and Vital Vein. All these sorts of areas. They're going to be good for rotating into in the mid game if the zone brings them your way, but they're not going to be the best just going off the drop. All these other areas that I circled previously, going to be a really, really good area for you to get started, for you to get your initial loot, and then you can move on from there. Now, as far as looting and 1v1 fights, basically there's this little trick that I exercise very, very early on, and that is dropping onto your opponent by landing on a railing. Very, very nice little tool there. And also you have your initial tools that you start off with. If you're a toxicologist, you have your toxic cloud along with your sprays that you can go with. For your pyromancer, you have your firewall that you can drop into with your fireballs as well. Tempest and Conduit, not so much. Frostborn as well. These 3 classes, maybe you want to back off. Maybe you want to get a little bit extra distance. Maybe loot up and get your offhand gauntlet before you actually start a fight. And in pretty much all cases, want to make sure that you grab a belt as early as possible, because you want that extra slot of armor. You want that extra resource that you can use. That's going to be very helpful going into your first set of fights. And of course, mid-game and end-game, we're going to be getting into those here pretty shortly. So, basic explanation of what in-game decision-making is and the core things that you should be aware of. I'll get into the core things, but basically your in-game decision-making, you want to be weighing at all times positive versus negative. You want to make sure that you're weighing how exactly you want to engage, what benefit is that going to give me in the long run or in the short term as well. And, what am I putting into it to then get out of it? So whenever we're talking about decision-making, we're talking about basically what's the most efficient thing that I can do in this specific scenario that'll get me an exile, give me some points on the board, but also make sure I don't lose too much health in the process. That's going to be our framework that we're going to be going with. And I do have a few clips here that I'll get it to as well towards the end, so you guys can see decision making and progress once we're done laying out the woodwork and laying out how everything works. So as we mentioned earlier, class and talent is going to be very, very important. We mentioned play style, how you want to kind of, basically just do a little bit of reading. You want to see what your class does, and you want to make sure that whatever you're looking to do in the HoloLens is going to be backed up by your class. It's very, very important. I'm going to make sure there's no questions coming in. Okay, looks like we're all good for right now. By the way, if you guys have a question at any time, feel free to ask away in the chat. I'll get to it whenever I can, whenever there's a break in the action. But if you have any questions, feel free to post either in the Discord channel, or you can post in the YouTube live stream, which I'm going to be looking at a little bit more. Of course, you want to be picking your offhand, and actually I can go ahead and log in to the practice here. So whenever you're thinking about your offhand and your rune, you want to be thinking about what is going to be the best thing that I can pick up that's going to either reinforce my playstyle or cover for what my playstyle doesn't currently have. As you can see, I didn't really pay attention with my with my talents here, so I just kind of have Spellslinger, Fervor, and Thirsty. Pretty good set of talents, but nonetheless. So let's say you want to pick a Toxic offhand, okay? You want to be thinking about what your class can do. Your class is a Pyromancer. You can go ahead and get as much range as possible with this Combust skill. Very, very nice to be able to hit your opponents from pretty far off if you happen to miss. You also have a bit of your Firewall that you can put down. Gives you a little bit of damage over time. Very, very nice. Now, what the Toxic does that most other gauntlets won't do is it has a very good elemental interaction. If you've played Spellbreak, then you know what Dragonfire is. Basically, you put this down, and then you get this giant AoE of little corrosion damage. It's pretty nice. Also, you're very good up close. So how this affects your decision making is you then want to be taking every fight that you can about as close as you can. So you have very, very good close range. It falls off of about mid-range, but then you have your fire to compensate for that. Notice how you don't really have anything for long range. You kind of have to rely on hitting these long range fireballs. It's very, very difficult to do. And you basically just want to be keeping in mind what your build can do and what it can't do. So what this can do, again, very, very good up close. If you happen to get the drop on somebody, you can land this giant AoE. It's very, very nice, but it doesn't really cover those long range engagements. Like, let's say that this dummy out here was a Frost user. That's a lot of travel time. He can easily sidestep. He can burn a root if he needs to. You shouldn't need to if you're that far away against Fireball, but I digress. And if he has a Frost or a Lightning, then you're pretty much out of luck. You need to play around your terrain and you know, approach in a different way. And we're going to be getting into that as well. Going into positioning here, basically the word of the day is high ground. You want to be getting as much vantage point as possible. Getting the high ground actually opens up quite a bit of gameplay. With Pyromancer, you're able to get all the use out of these surfaces so that you can land your Combust skill. And also it just gives you this beautiful little angle to where you kind of know what's on the ground below you. You kind of know where to position, and you have a better angle for attack, as opposed to if you're up here trying to hit something, you might hit that wall. You might just completely miss, and it kind of blocks your view with this wall here a little bit. So having the high ground, very, very self-explanatory. We'll make sure you have that at all times. Also, your zone rotation. If I had, let's pretend that this is the map here, and I'll kind of draw out some zones for you. Let's say the initial zone is right here, and you want to be kind of closing in to these later zones. Basically, the premise of zone rotations is you want to make sure that if you are going to pay attention to the zone at all, which you should be doing at all times, then you want to make sure to just move to it early, pick up your central position, and then, you know, kind of go from there. And basically, the more central of the zone that you can get, the more of a chance you're going to be in the next zone, which will help you in your further decision making. So, and some zones you'll kind of get into some scenarios where sometimes it'll just kind of hug one side and it'll hug another side again, and you have this little sliver to play with. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it'll happen like that. Basically, just make sure that you're rotating into the zone kind of early on so that you can at least cover this area, and then whenever the next zone hits, that's a big probability that you're going to be in the next zone. So it kind of saves you a little bit of time. It'll save you a little bit of trouble getting into the later stages of the game. And of course, your relative cooldowns when you're in fights. It's another big important one to factor in when you're making decisions. Like if you take a look at my Toxic Cloud right here, and I throw it, you can see that I had about 15 seconds before it will refresh. A little bit force a habit of me to go ahead and get that Dragonfire. But basically, if you're looking at the Toxic Cloud, you're looking at your cooldowns. You can also do this with Dash and also your Firewall. Just keep an eye on everything that has a timer on it. This is going to be very important for especially fighting Toxicologists. It's going to be very important for fighting anything that has a timer related to it. Dash and Spring Step going to be a little bit more difficult to go with because they have such short cooldowns. But for stuff like Stone Shapers, for classes like Toxicologist, like I mentioned, those timers on the boulders and Toxicloud respectively going to be very, very important for your fights when you're getting down to it. So just knowing what your opponent can do and what they can't do at any given time by measuring their cooldowns going to be very, very important information for you to soak in. And then lastly, going to be combining all this together for best results. Basically, this is getting into the flow of Spellbreak and getting into sort of the big dance of what Spellbreak really is. If you look at how Spellbreak is done, and I get a pretty good opportunity to watch this from a caster perspective. It's all a big dance, basically. It's a dance of cooldowns, it's a dance of mechanics, and it's a dance of positioning. And it's really, if you put all those three things together and you do them well, there's going to be very, very little that other players can do, especially if they don't know about these concepts, for you to be able to just dominate the competition. It's really a big eye-opener. The sooner you master cooldowns, mechanics, and your positioning, the sooner you're going to be getting these 10, 20 XL games. You can get really, really insane with it. Now, diving deeper into some of these topics here, you're going to be talking about beginning, of course, with class, your talents, your drop spot. We kind of already went over drop spots, but now you have these elemental shrines that you can drop into with these elemental shrines that you can drop into that spawn these rarities of gauntlets that are going to be very good for an early advantage. It might be worth it in some areas if you have a certain kind of drop to be able to hop in and really, make good use of where these locations are as far as getting into where the elemental shrines are and what they drop. It's a very, very difficult decision to make, because if you have a lot of traffic in that area, like let's say you're dropping in and you have say 3 or 4 players near you, then you might not want to go towards the elemental shrine because it only gives the one gauntlet. Yes, it is higher damage, but that's really the only benefit you get. Whereas if you break off and try to find a lot of chests, you can find a lot of gear. You can find shoes. You can find a belt. You can find an amulet. You can find a lot of stuff to be able to help you instead of just the one bigger rarity gauntlet. And even when you're looting other chests, you might find that higher rarity gauntlet anyway. So dropping your elemental shrines, while it can be a very, very nice early advantage and you know what you're getting, it's a very, very big investment. So places like the Toxic Elemental Shrine, places like the Lightning Elemental Shrine, or the Frost Elemental Shrine, maybe you want to stray away from that, and maybe you want to focus on more higher density area loots. Now, elemental shrines like Fire and Stone have very, very good density of loot near them, especially Sawtooth Mountain and then the northern part of Fever Break. Going to be very, very concentrated as far as the amount of chests in that area. So it's going to be a very, very good place to drop. Also, Wind. You probably don't want to go for an early Wind unless you're a Tempest in Hemwood, but also Hemwood has that higher density of chests as well, so something you might want to think about. And hello, everybody new coming in. This is Spellbreak Academy, where we're going to be talking about mastering decision making, as you can see in the title. So I hope you're enjoying so far. And also, if you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat, and I'll get to them whenever I find a break in the action. Now, talking about the relative strength of classes when you're making your decisions, this is still early game stuff, but it's still very important to go on, because if you don't get past the early game, then you don't get to experience the mid and late game. So going into the relative strength of these classes, basically the big three are going to be Toxicologist, Pyromancer, and Stone Shaper. These three classes have very good damage off the drop. They also have pretty good tools to be able to use as far as getting damage out. Basically, in the early game, it's all about damage until one of you finds a belt. So if you can land some of that early damage earlier on, then you're going to be in a very, very good spot. Toxicologists, of course, get close, land your cloud, and slap them away for that early damage. Pyromancer might be the best early game class because you have that firewall ignite damage, and then if you're landing your fireballs, you also have more ignite, and then combust kind of helps you out as far as sealing that early damage. And then, of course, Stone Shaper. We've all been there. We've all been a beginner. If you get hit by stone, it hurts a lot, and if you're new to the game, you don't really know what to do at first. So Stone, you're going to also be a fairly good option as well. A Tempest, Frostborn, and Conduit. Frostborn does give you some good damage. It's just that what's the cost of that damage? So for Frostborns, whenever you're charging your early Frost, basically it drains your whole mana bar if you don't have an amulet or a higher rarity Frost. So for Frostborns, maybe dropping at that elemental shrine is going to be good for you so you don't drain your whole mana bar early on. But in any other place, Frost is going to be very, very weak off the drop, so want to keep that in mind. And maybe space yourself out, loot up a little bit before you decide to engage. It's also a pretty weak class without its skill Tundra. So make good use of that Frozen Alacrity. Make great use of this skill right here and this skill right here, your two biggest ones in Frostborn, so that you can kind of kite away and put yourself in a better situation. Now for Tempest, Wind is great when you have it in higher rarities and when you have damage mods attached to it, but it's not very great off the drop. It's going to be a lot of little damage, and you're going to get blown up by a Toxic, a Fire, or a Stone early on. So space yourself out, get yourself that extra loot, get you an offhand gauntlet. And then Conduit, much the same way. Conduit's a little bit different because of this lovely skill over here, Potential Energy. Gives you that max +5 with every bolt that you're firing. It's a little bit weak off the drop because it does take up a ton of mana, and you do need that higher rarity in the amulet to make it work to the best of its ability. But if you can land the sorcery, which is going to be Lightning Strike here, you get 20 free damage and possibly a stun if the opponent isn't running Harmony. So very, very good thing to look out for. And then, we're going to be looking at, in the early game especially, playing around that high ground like we were talking about earlier. Want to make sure you're on a higher place, get yourself some better angles, and make your opponent uncomfortable. And that's kind of another premise we're going to be working on during this whole discussion, making your opponent uncomfortable, making them get into a place where they don't really want to engage you and they don't feel comfortable with the kit that they're running. It's going to be a big part in getting into mastery decision making here into the second half of what we're going to be getting into. Of course, your early sorcery uses, I kind of touched it on using Lightning Strike early on Conduit, but this really applies to just about every class, with the exception of Tempest and Frostborn, because they don't really provide damage early on. But especially Toxicologist, Pyromancer, Stone Shaper, they all do this fairly well. You have your early Boulder, you have your early Firewall, you have your early Toxic Cloud. A good strategy that I like to use early on is landing, of course, on the high ground above your opponent, so you get out of that fall animation more quickly. And then you're able to have that angle. You're able to throw down your sorcery first, which is going to be a big thing in the early game. If you can get rid of your sorcery, you're already ticking down that cooldown. You pretty much get a free shot if you land in the right area. And you're just able to get that earlier damage, and then once you land down your sorcery, you can then follow up with one of your spells, and it makes for a very, very nice combo very early on. And we're going to be getting into some gameplay. I have some Clash gameplay ready for y'all. It's not the best in terms of Battle Royale, but there are 2 game modes for a reason, and we're going to be getting into some of the more Clash things, so we have that more rapid fire feedback sort of thing. All right. Now then, after the initial early game phase, there are a few things you want to be looking out for. More so what we were talking about earlier with the zone. What part of the map do you want to be fighting on? Let's say you're going towards Sawtooth Mountain, and there's that big slopey mountain. If you're a Stone Shaper, probably want to make good use of that and let your shockwaves travel down the slopes. And it was updated recently to kind of cut down on some of the slopes that it can travel down, but I believe Sawtooth Mountain is still a very good area for Stone Shapers, if I remember correctly. Also, if you're a Conduit, you want to be finding those, Conduit and Frostborn, really. You want to be finding those high ground areas so that you have more angles to work with, and of course you're putting your opponent at a bit of a disadvantage. They have to burn all those resources to get up to your same level, whether it be mana, whether it be a rune, and that's going to be a big sort of advantage for you. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on what part of the map you want to be fighting on, what sort of terrain you'll be fighting on, and you'll be in a good spot. And then also you want to be talking about what is your current loadout, and we talked about it as well whenever we were talking about Pyromancer. If you're running a Toxic Offhand, then you have access to Dragonfire. You have access to that big AoE that you can make good use of, and you're really, really good close range. Now, if your loadout does not support a long-range engagement tool, like a Frost or a Lightning, then you probably want to stay away from those types of engagements. You probably want to either use the terrain to your advantage so you can circle back to them and make sure that you can close that distance in a safe way. Or if you're not feeling comfortable with taking that engagement, you don't have to. You can go away, you can run, you can, hide behind some cover. You don't have to take every single engagement. And that's something that's going to be very important for you in game. Just because you see a player, that doesn't mean that you have to attack them. It doesn't mean that you have to go after them immediately. You can play it safe. You can kind of back off, and you can just sort of let the situation play out until it is good for you to engage in. And this will get into something else that a lot of you players love to hate at a lot of times during your game, is getting into third parties. Now, I have a bit of a controversial opinion where I'm actually a supporter of third parties. You know why? Because third parties offer a very good opportunity for some of you newer players. I won't say lesser skilled, but just say newer. For you to hop in the action and get yourself a little exile. And it's really, really nice whenever you can play it correctly as well. That's the big thing here. Third parties, they're not a plague on Spellbreak. They're not this thing you need to be too afraid of. It's something that you should be using to your advantage, and it's playing around when to third party and when not to third party that you guys need to really focus up on. So whenever we're getting into third parties here, basically what you want to be looking out for is kind of what we were talking about at the very beginning. What am I getting out of this engagement that I am putting in? Like, what's the comparison there? If I'm losing a whole bunch of health and I'm still getting the exile, not going to be as good as if I'm not losing as much health, because then a third party can swoop in. Maybe I'm one shot and they get a quick little cleanup. And there's two sides of that coin. You can use that to your advantage, and you can use that to to sort of learn when to engage further and when to sort of back off. So just think about that going forward here. I'm getting kind of my drinks right now. All right, there we go. Much better. So whenever you're talking about third parties, you want to be very cognizant of where your health is. You want to be very cognizant of what your positioning is as you're going deeper and deeper into the engagement. And you want to be very cognizant of everything around you. This is a concept that I call keeping your ears open. Basically, it's making sure that you're not so tunnel vision mentally into one singular engagement so that you're more aware of your surroundings. Like, let's say a person throws a boulder somewhere, pretty easy to pick up on, right? You can hear the crash. You can make sure that you know which direction that boulder was thrown in. But if you're in the middle of a fight, sometimes if you're so dialed in, you might not hear that boulder. So it's a very good analogy to kind of just sit back, let yourself be more aware of your surroundings, so that if there is a boulder in the vicinity, or even a fireball or a frost, something that gives off an audio cue, you can hear it, be more aware of what's going on around you outside of the immediate fight, so that you're more informed. So that you're more informed going into that engagement that you happen to be in. Okay, so third parties, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing when you get them. It's a curse when you're against them. But changing up your play a little bit to where you can handle them a bit more gracefully is going to be the key to mastering at least Battle Royale and Spellbreak, and to some extent Clash as well. Okay, now right here, I kind of spoke on this next point a little bit whenever I was talking about Pyromancer yet again. Where are you strong? You want to know where you're strong at, your advantages and disadvantages. So again, when you're playing Pyromancer with a Toxic Offhand, just know that you're good at close range, you're bad at long range, and you want to kind of play around that a little bit so that you can minimize the damage done to you and maximize damage done to your opponent. And then also, very important point that I see even competitive players mess up sometimes. What is your current class level? Now, what is your class level? So your class level is going to be it's going to be unlocking all of these lovely little things over to the right hand side. So when you say, sorry, skill levels, my mistake, skill levels. So also, obviously at level 1 off the drop, you're going to be getting Combust off of Pyromancer. At level 2, you're going to be getting Firefly, which is a very, very important skill to have. And then of course 3, you have your Pyrolysis and Conflagrations level 4. But for a class like Pyromancer, you want to be paying most attention to these first 2 skills right here. And what I see players all the time do, this happens all the time. let's say that you are in a game and you just see your friend, for whatever reason, walk through a flame wall and not get his firefly. That is him not being, that is him or her, not being very, very aware of where his current skill level is. And, you know, just not being aware that they haven't unlocked firefly yet. So this is something that you can do very, very easily. I'm actually going to hop into practice and show you a very simple trick to be able to know what your skill level is, okay? You ready for this? If you're on PC and you're on normal settings, just press tab. You see to the left-hand side here, I'm apparently a toxicologist, but your Vanishing Mist, you haven't unlocked it yet. Your viscosity is right here. Oh, wait, my camera's in the way. Let me go ahead and remove that for just a second. Let's see. All right. There you go. So, there you go. It's better. So, you can see here, if you just press tab, that I have viscosity unlocked, right? I don't have Vanishing Mist, and this is going to be very important for informing what exactly you can do with your class. Toxicologist is one of these classes that doesn't really come online until you unlock Vanishing Mist, and Outbreak for that matter. So you want to be paying attention to each of these different levels whenever you're going into your games. Like, let's say I want to make sure that I can use your Vanishing Mist. In practice, you can just pick this up. Once you enter the new zone and you level up, you can see there's a little update right there in the right of your screen, and then you can press tab, and again, just check on what skills you have unlocked. I now have Vanishing Mist. Guess what? I can do this now. It's great. If I don't have that, then I can't, obviously. And this goes kind of goes into Outbreak as well. Like, let's say I am a toxicologist, right? And I don't have my Outbreak skill yet. If I go invisible and try to slap, just going to do normal damage, all right? Whereas if I have that Outbreak, I can do that extra 75%. So whenever you're going through your Hololands here, especially for these early levels, make sure that you're pressing tab, or if you're not sure what level you are, you can get a quick little check. You can also check your talent points up here. It's a very, very useful thing for you to be able to use, and I see too many people not use it. All right. I'm going to exit to the menu there. So just good things to sort of keep in mind whenever you're in the early game to make sure that you're keeping up with what you need to be keeping up with. Now, as you're moving into the end game, of course, you want to be thinking very carefully about each move that you make. One of these things that you want to be keeping in mind is your positioning, of course. We talked about it again. High ground, high ground, high ground. Always use it. Always make sure that you're keeping in mind where exactly you are in the fight, where you're moving to in the fight, and just keep in mind the terrain around you. Like, is there that halcyon wall that we love to talk about on the competitive scene? Is there that slope of the mountain that you want to be positioning yourself up against so that you have that extra little bit of slope for your shockwave spell? Or you have that extra angle so that you can land a quick little frost or some lightning damage. You know, just stuff like this. Make sure that you're not autopiloting. Make sure that you're paying attention to every move that you're making and making it in the best way to suit you in your engagement. Very, very important. Okay. Also, you want to be keeping some good awareness of the players around you. Like, is it going to be safe to engage or should I hold off? This kind of gets into the third-party speak, but I'll get more into this whenever we're into the video clip side of things. And guys, if y'all have VODs, I think that Google Forms thing that y'all filled out had a spot for VODs. So if y'all had any, feel free to either send it to Brett or Flossing the chat, and they'll send it to me. So that way, if you have any gameplay for us to sort of go over to critique on your decision making or kind of what you should be focused on, that way we can get to it. Anyway, keeping a good awareness of players around you. Just basically keep your ears open like we were talking about earlier. Make sure that you're not hearing any spells coming your way. Make sure that if you are on some high ground, if you're at a good vantage point, that you're able to look around and make sure that you're aware of any players approaching your position. And this goes towards in the middle of fights as well. You want to make sure that you're constantly looking around, constantly making sure that you're aware of anything that could be happening around you with players or any sort of environmental factor. That way you're always prepared for what comes your way. And if there is a third party engaging on you, then maybe you don't want to continue the fight. Maybe you want to start running. You want to start putting space between you and your opponent so that when the third party happens, you're not the person getting caught in it. It's a very good strategy to follow. You might see it later today in the duos qualifiers that we have for Element. And you can, of course, join the Discord up above, but definitely make sure that you're more aware of what's happening around you, so that way if something is about to collapse on you, you're not caught in the middle of it. And then also this kind of gets into the more thinking aspect towards Spellbreak, but constantly evaluate your build and what sort of environment that you're in. Like if you're dead set on running a fire and toxic offhand for that Dragonfire combo, then that's fine. It's something that you want to be focused on. But for those of you that have more of an open mind, just keep in mind like what exactly your build does, and maybe keep in mind if you see an extra elemental gauntlet laying around, if you see an extra rune, maybe you want to think about, should I change up my rune? Should I change up my offhand? It's going to be a very important decision for you to make for the later game if you do end up going that route. But just make sure that you're always keeping your options open. You're always making sure that you're constantly evaluating what you can do in each situation. Like we have a clip from Element not too long ago of a player called Next from EU, from Europe, changing out one of his frost gauntlets for a fire in the later circles, because he knows that as the zone is closing in, he's not going to have as much use of a frost gauntlet as he would maybe a fire with his toxicologist class. So it gives him that extra AoE. It helps him with landing these mid-air shots a little bit easier, especially in closer range. So it's just stuff you want to think about. It's not something that happens very often, but it's something that can happen. So you always want to keep it in the back of your mind. Yes, you will get the Holobot code towards the end of the presentation, I believe around 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. So just not quite that immediately, but we're going to be getting to it a little bit later. I believe I had a question. As a Frostborn, should I go into the next zone early or late? So as a Frostborn, whenever you have access to a skill like Icicle here, with the new change right here on Ice Lance full charge, you can eliminate the mana cost with your Ice Lance, and you honestly don't have to float in the air either. You can just do a little bunny hop and it'll activate Icicle. It's not so much about getting to the next zone fast as it is just making sure that you're well looted. So if you're a Frostborn, make sure that you're hitting as many chests as possible, so that you can make sure you have your belt, make sure you have your boots, make sure that you have your little amulet here, and of course your higher rarity gauntlet. That way you can just make sure you're the strongest that you can possibly be, because Frostborn is one of those classes that gets stronger as time goes on. So just make sure that you're well looted in the early game and that you're picking off third parties if you can. That's really going to be your main focus. Getting to the zone, it is nice. You can get that early zone advantage, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing would be getting your early loot. All right. And then, of course, in a battle royale, we all know this. Sometimes RNG and randomness can get to you, especially in the early game if you're not picking up good enough loot or any sort of early engagements like that. So making good decisions, though, like making sure that you're putting yourself in the best scenario possible to give yourself the best chance of success, so that some of that randomness and some of that RNG can be forgotten a little bit. I know if anybody has watched my personal gameplay, you know that I'm not the best at mechanics. I'm working to get better at it, but basically where I get my strength is just knowing what to do in all scenarios and making sure that I am aware that what I am currently doing with my build, or what I'm doing with my positioning or my zone rotation, is going to give me the best chance of victory, mechanics or no mechanics. So just make sure that you're applying your knowledge well, and you should be good. Again, make sure you're keeping in mind your class strengths. So for Toxicologists, like we said earlier, making sure that you're staying close range with the way the Toxic Gauntlet works. And using your movement options, your Vanishing Mist. If you're running Shadow Step or Dash, then you can use those runes as well. And you're spreading Sickness as well. And just making sure that you're keeping in mind what advantages you're giving yourself by either reclouding or using a Shadow Step, to that way you get the biggest investment you possibly can out of Outbreak. It's going to be your big bread and butter. Pyromancer, this is the keep them at arm's length class. Excuse me. Basically, you have a really big advantage early on, so make sure you're pressing that early advantage with your firewalls and your fireballs. And then basically you just want to be keeping yourself in what I call the pocket, which is keeping yourself at kind of a mid-range area. That way you have the best opportunity for you to land your fireballs, and you have the best opportunity for you to control the battlefield with your firewalls and everything as far as that goes. Of course, you have access to your conflagration and your pyrolysis later on, which is definitely going to help you out. It's just not going to be as advantageous as these other two skills. So just keep in mind where your strengths are and everything like that. And then for your Tempest class, this is a very, very weak early class, so make sure that you're looting up before you engage. Make sure that you are collecting your belt, your amulet, your higher rarity gauntlets, and possibly a fire or a frost offhand. Make sure that you have those components in before you engage. Again, if you're in the early game, maybe don't want to engage quite as heavily, and make sure you're using your movement to the greatest extent here. Of course, Squall, with its recent buffs, you can just jump in the air and get that extra little bit of damage and damage reduction. But also keep in mind, if you're being chased down and you have a skill like Wind Surge, you can use it to wind run and do all these fancy techs with the dash rune and spring step and everything like that. So just make sure you're using all those components of the class so that you can give yourself the best chance of success. For Stone Shaper, again, very, very good early class. It's very, very nice in terms of damage, and of course your Stone Skin ability going to give you that extra 20 armor off the drop, and also give you the you're able to get the initial 20 armor from slamming down your shockwave, so it's very, very nice in terms of that. Also, Stone itself has very, very high damage, so you can couple it with something like Focus Mana or even Recklessness for earlier, or for well, really the early game would work well with that too. You can couple it with different early game runes or early game talents, so just keep in mind of that. Bedrock, you can get some gnarly little movement mix-ups, so that's pretty nice to be using. Accretion with your boulder size as it grows as it flies, obviously, and it'll increase the damage as well. So make sure that you're keeping in mind your boulders. And also another thing that some people might not know is here, I'll go ahead and demonstrate just so that it's on camera for you guys. When you're using a class like Stone Shaper, you have access to these double boulders, right? Well, if you use it in just the right way, you can actually combo into a lot of big damage. And I'll try to show you a little bit of some bedrock tech as well. There we go, we get our double boulder here. So basically what boulders allow you to do is it allows you to combo into a lot of big damage. So let's say you're going to engage on an opponent here. Best thing you can do, quick little double boulder into a shockwave. That's 45 and 224s. So you're looking at 48 damage, 45 damage, 53, 93 damage right off the get-go. So almost a 100 to 0 combo just right off the get-go from close range. So it's very, very useful if you're able to pull it off, and it should affect your decision making as well, because I mean that's an advantage that not everyone is going to have. So just make sure that you're keeping in mind what each class can do. Also, you can combo with your bedrock skill and cancel it in many different ways. It's pretty useful. All right, and that's going to affect your approach as well. Maybe later, Lucas. Let's see, Frostborn. Again, not as weak as something like Tempest or Conduit, but still pretty weak in the early game. You still have access to your burst damage with your Frost Gauntlet, but you don't really have great use out of it, really, because it drains a lot of mana. In fact, it drains all your mana without an amulet or a higher rarity. So just make sure you're staying careful when you're playing with Frost. Kind of answered this question earlier, but yeah, just make sure that you're playing the early game a little bit safe, making sure that you're able to gather that loot, much like how Tempest is, and make sure that you're able to give yourself an early enough advantage in your fights to really make taking a fight worth it. If you're able to land some free damage with your Frost Gauntlet and able to give yourself an early health advantage, that's going to be very important for snowballing that engagement into an Exile. So just make sure you're especially keeping that in mind whenever you're running Frostborn in the early game. And then once Tundra comes online, you have access to this beautiful immune to damage. I butchered that one, but you're immune to damage while casting Flash Freeze for about 0.65 seconds, I believe is the timing. It's very, very useful for turning a fight and very useful for putting that extra little bit of CC on your opponent if they are not running Harmony. Very, very nice. Then going into Conduit, again, pretty weak early game because you don't have an amulet and you don't have that higher rarity. But once you get those two things and maybe even a belt on top of that, make sure you're using your potential energy to the best of its ability. Make sure you're landing your sorcery with the Lightning Strike. And then once the later game comes up, you have access to Power Surge, which allows you to make great use out of Focus Mana and Fervor. So whenever you land down your Lightning Strike, you eliminate your mana cost from your spells for about 4 seconds, and it just gives you that extra little bit of damage with Focus Mana. It's a very, very oppressive, very, very good talent combination with that skill. That kind of takes us through the classes. Now, one thing I didn't really get too heavily on are the talents here. I kind of just trusted y'all to read, but I will kind of get into it just a little bit. The big things I want you to take away from this are Focus Mana, or really, let me get more broad actually. Let me just go ahead and say that for each of these talents, make sure you're reading the description and make sure that it's fitting what you want to do with your particular build. Like if I'm trying to run a Glass Cannon build like Focus Mana, Fervor, and Recklessness, I know that spacing out my shots are going to give me more value out of the Focus Mana. And if I'm out of armor and I have Recklessness, that Fervor is going to do a very, very good job of dealing that extra damage more frequently. And Fervor is just a really good talent all around, so make sure that if you don't know what to pick on your body talent, Fervor is a pretty safe option. Also, keep in mind, if you want to get more movement out of your build, like let's say you're running Toxicologist and you want to get more than one Shadow Step off more frequently, make sure that you're running Runic Fluency. That way you have that extra charge of Shadow Step and you can get a quick little 1-2-3 combo with your Outbreak. And then Harmony, the bane of Conduits and Frostborns, and Frost users for that matter. Harmony is a very, very nice talent right now. It allows you to approach things from a very, very, I guess, gung-ho would be a pretty good word to use. You can basically just go in without worrying that you're going to get stunned or frozen, or slowed for that matter, which is good. So if you're having trouble with getting shocked by lightning strikes or getting slowed down by flash freezes, you're not quite there yet, picking up Harmony is going to be a very, very useful talent for you. And of course, if you're running something like squads, running Thirsty as well is going to be a pretty good one for you because it gives you that extra health and armor regen of nearby teammates for 50% of what you regen as well. So that's pretty nice. Going to get out of that. Now I'll open up for any questions that you guys have. Recklessness is bad on Stone Shaper because of Stone Skin. You know, it's something, if you're in the middle of a fight, and you're constantly getting your armor knocked off, it's not the worst thing to run. I can think of other things that are worse, but that is a good point. That Recklessness probably don't want to run on Stone Shaper too much because that Stone Skin is going to keep you above that 0 armor threshold. So good point to be bringing up in the chat here. Hey, Lucas, I'm not going to be able to play right now because I am teaching Spellbreak Academy for right now. But we're going to be getting into some clips and some VODs that I'll review of myself. That way you can kind of break down the decision making. And honestly, we've been talking about decision making for a long time, but we haven't really seen any gameplay yet. And that's really where this whole concept is gonna shine. So let's go ahead and open up a little bit of VOD here. That is a real good way for you to get muted, my friend. All right, so let's kind of break down what we just saw here. I don't know if you can hear this. I'll try to shut down the music for you guys. That way you can hear this a little bit more clearly. So let's get the desktop audio on as well. Make sure y'all can hear it. Yeah. Turn my desktop audio up a little bit. Let's see. Let's just do full. All right, good. Okay, so this is we're going to be getting into the VOD review section of Spellbreak Academy here. This is going to be tying everything that we just talked about all together that I've been talking about for the past hour. So whenever we're talking about your positioning, your class strengths, everything like that, this is a good clash game that I had just yesterday actually with a toxicologist, and this is the early drop, so it can be used for battle royale as well, as long as you're using the same concept. It can really go a long way here. My build here is going to be, if I can get, will it not let me mark? Hello. All right, looks like I won't be able to use my pen tool here, but y'all be able to see it. Why use focus mana on Frostborn? Because I was playing Clash at the time, and it's really fun. That's why. Also, Icicle is really, really useful whenever you're using it on Frostborn. Whenever you're running focus mana, because you're able to charge up your Frost, you're able to jump up in the air to activate Icicle, and you actually don't lose any mana whenever you do that now on the full charge. So getting focus mana empowered Frost shots is really, really fun, and you can do it in rapid succession, which is pretty nice. Obviously, you want to be running Harmony most of the time because your own ice trails can break and slow you down and all that sort of thing. But it's not the only build that you have to run. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this VOD here. I don't know if y'all just heard that, but that is a player reading a talent scroll. And as you can see, I have marked on the screen where exactly I am looking for him to be reading up a talent scroll. And I'm not really pushing this too early on. I'm actually going to be waiting. I'm going to be waiting and making sure that I'm in an advantageous position for me to then engage on this particular environment. And as you can see in my mini map here, I'm kind of in no man's land. This isn't really in a Clash game. If you see multiple people dropping in an area, especially in the middle towards Halcyon, you don't want to be going guns a-blazing or anything like that. You want to be making sure to take it slow, make sure that you are putting yourself in a good situation to where you can get out of an area if you need to. Okay, so I'm listening for that talent. I hear him opening, and there we go. First thing I do is I'm going to take advantage of my high ground position, and I'm running Toxic, so if you're running something like a Pyromancer like he is right here, as you can see this little emblem right here where my mouse is, it indicates that he's a Pyromancer. I also see from my initial Toxic Cloud that he does have armor. He has picked up a belt, so I need to play this just a little bit more cautiously. But also, since I have corrosion on my toxic gauntlet, it'll drain his armor really, really fast. So that armor might not mean as much as it would otherwise. If you're playing something like a conduit or a pyromancer, maybe you stay on this ledge over here to the right, and you fire from above right here. It gives him a little bit of a harder time to land his fireballs. Or you can even be above this structure, kind of higher up than where I started out. So getting into the engagement, you land down your toxic, it'll blind him, and look at this. As soon as you blind him with the toxic cloud, that's the dual effect of this for toxicologists. If you put down a cloud, they are then inside the cloud. All they're going to see is green. They don't see the terrain around them. They don't see what's attacking them. They see the direction in which they're being attacked, but also the ticks from Toxic Cloud, going to make it a little bit difficult for them to figure out where exactly they're being attacked from. And whenever you're attacking somebody, it gives you this red outline, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to then see where exactly they are, even if they're behind a wall or behind a cloud. So it makes follow-up really, really easy. You get up close and personal, throw off their aim, and that's an easy cleanup. All right, so any questions on this particular engagement? And I'll be looking through the Spellbreak Academy chat as well. Okay. There. All right, I'll go ahead and give you a few more seconds. Okay, as long as we're all good. Basically the initial part. Again, use your sorcery earlier on. It helps with your the decision making process is I want to make sure to get that early damage off and make sure that I'm also blinding him in his approach. That it sets me up for the biggest opportunity of success. Also, using Kovacs and a name trainer helps out with those toxic slaps. Okay, going into the later part, rotating into the early zone, you can kind of see what I'm getting into here. So initially when I see this guy, notice how I'm not just bull rushing him and I'm not going for the immediate frost. I know that coming into this mid-game scenario, that there will be players around him. So I'm looping around to this higher ground and I'm making sure that I can see everything that's around me. Like, see, I see these other two players. I would not have put myself in a good situation if I just fired off the get-go. So sometimes it's worth it to take it slow. Sometimes it's worth it to sort of back off a little bit, make sure that you're well aware of what's going on around you. That way you have a more informed opinion on what exactly you are getting yourself into. Let me make sure that I'm missing anything here. I do believe that we are good. All right. And then, of course, I'm looking around. And the big thing, as you can see, I'm picking up my targets very, very cautiously. So I see these two players over here. They're well ahead of me. This is going to be a bit of a difficult shot to land with a frost, even if I was good. So he just used a dash. I'm going to keep that in the back pocket, in the back of my mind for a little bit. And we'll be looking at our next engagement here. This player over here kind of singled himself out from the pack. And it looks like he is not going to be in the best scenario to get back up from his friend. So he does put out... Now, the reason I choose to disengage here is I realize that he's going to be blocking my frost shots with that fire tornado. And I know my kit isn't really that well equipped to deal with a Tempest. So at this point, I decide, you know what? No harm, no foul. I haven't really lost anything. I haven't gained anything. So I'm going to rotate off and see if I can get one of his friends instead. Okay, that's exactly what I do here. I see a Frostborn. I'm making sure to keep an eye out here. He comes up close to me. I'm able to use my Outbreak. I do believe I end up losing this engagement, but you still see the point of what I'm trying to do here. Oh, actually, I do end up getting it. Okay, so what am I doing right here? I am trying to make sure that I'm getting a high ground advantage no matter what I'm doing. So even if I'm getting damaged right here, yeah, it hurts. It's not the best scenario for you to be, you know, keep yourself in. But getting high ground on the Tempest is going to be very, very important because if you can land that early damage, they don't really have a lot of tools to be able to make up much of that damage. They do have their Wind Gauntlet and their offhand with the Squall buff to sort of outdamage you to some extent, but most of the time they're going to be running a fire offhand, and in this case he is. So I know that I can keep my distance from him. It's going to be difficult for him to land any damage unless I'm really close up. So Frost is going to be my best friend. I'm just keeping my damage at all time, or keeping my distance at all times. Easy Frost, okay? So again, going to the very beginning of this scenario, keeping the high ground up here, waiting to engage, even though I see this guy out here. I'm waiting to engage to make sure I have all the information available to me. And then once I see someone singled out, I try to land up my Frost. Now he's going to dodge out of the way again, lands the Fire Tornado. So I'm trying to circle around, trying to break off the engagement, making sure that there's no one approaching, no one giving him backup. And then once he decides to re-engage, he's a little bit too close. Quick little toxic, the corrosion tick right here as well, to make sure that his armor is being shaved off. And then also, quick little point to bring up here. If you're playing as a toxicologist, if you know that your opponent is using fire and you see him put that firewall down behind you and it's off your screen, look for his arm motion, okay? Right there. You see it extended? It was kind of extended out here. That means firewall. So something you just want to keep in mind. I'm trying to land the Toxic Cloud in a way that it explodes in his face so it gets more damage. Obviously very hard to do, and I don't end up doing it. But the Vanishing Mist in this scenario wouldn't have done me very much good because I don't even have Outbreak yet. So something to keep in mind. Now at this point, I'm trying to block any wind and fire. So I'll land down the quick little flash freeze. And then from there, it's keeping your distance, keeping the high ground, and then landing the frost when you can, because he can't dodge the frost. All right, so very, very simple stuff. Also, I don't know if you heard, but you can hear the audio cue of this guy coming around. Listen. Okay, I see that my Outbreak's ready, and my Shadow Step's off cooldown. So I'm just going to bull rush here because I have an advantage early on. I think I end up losing this. Or actually, I get him. Let's go to how this was played here. So if I didn't get this early advantage early on, obviously I don't take this one. But as you can see, I'm starting from a high ground perspective. I have full mana. He does not because he is levitating. Very important to keep that in mind. I start off with the early health advantage. He doesn't have any shield. And then from here, I have 2 Shadow Steps I can use. It's a little bit difficult. It's a little bit difficult because he is running fire. So want to keep in mind that he is going to be very good at mid to close range. And Shadow Step will tick out of invisibility if you're not careful. But the quick little Toxic Slap does do me some good. This is Clash, everybody, so he drops in, and he is going to end up finishing me right here. Not much you can do there. But anyway, those previous 2 engagements, make sure you're surveying the situation. Make sure that you're keeping in mind what you can do and what you can't do, where your relative strengths are, and you're going to be in a pretty good spot. All right, any questions so far? All right, now with that clip out of the way, I'll do one more after we go ahead and give out the holo code. It is about that time. So make sure that you are listening up for that holobot code, okay? Go ahead and give me some ones in the chat if you're ready for that holo code. Give me some ones, so make sure to get it your way. Make sure you're listening. Okay, good. We got 2. We got a wild Brett in the chat. Okay. Nice. We do have ones. Good. All right, sweet. We got 2. Matt D over here messing with me. All right. So the holobot code, I'll bring it up real quick. The holobot code today is going to be make good decisions. It's all lowercase and it is spaced out. Make good decisions. Make good decisions. Whenever I'm spacing myself out over here, whenever I am choosing to not engage directly, whenever I'm making sure to give myself the best opportunity for victory, I am going to be making good decisions. Make good decisions, everybody. While we're doing that, we're going to be getting into a bit of more Clash gameplay. Make good decisions. All right, so I'm looking for my next target out here. I'm playing on Conduit this time with a fire offhand glass cannon build because I also hate the world. Okay, I noticed that there's a Frost user over here, and I'm trying to ping out where he is, making sure I'm using all of the different terrain to assist me. Making sure to keep my distance as well. Now, one thing you'll notice at the very beginning here, this next zone will tick over, or I'll go ahead and check. Again, what am I doing here? I'm making sure I did it really, really quick. This is something you can do really, really quick if you want to bring up your class skills. There we go. I timed it well. All right. Make good decisions. Easy to say, hard to do. Hard to do it in 0.001 seconds. This is true. It'll take a little bit of experience. But the more you try it, the more you're cognizant of it, the more naturally it'll come. Like at this point, I say not to autopilot, of course, but at a certain point, you can kind of autopilot a little bit because those decisions are so ingrained in your brain that you can just sort of, you know, mix it with the flow of Spellbreak, and you can sort of just make it go in the direction you want to. So this will be the last clip that we review here. Hope you guys have been enjoying so far, and we're going to be getting into the strengths of mid-game to late-game conduit and what exactly you can do with some of these engagements, because I do turn a lot of fights, and it's all due to knowledge, all right? It's all due to knowledge. Definitely not because I'm talented. So real quick, I'm checking my loadout so that I know what tools I have available. I have Potential Energy, I have Overload, I have Power Surge. Power Surge is the big one because I'm running Focus Mana this match, so it's going to give me that extra little bit of damage. And if I run up here, as you can see, getting a quick little early damage, and then I'm going to lay down the Lightning Strike again. Take a look at my Focus Mana talent here. You're going to see that it is glowing. That means that it is activated at all times, and I'm going to have infinite mana, so you can see the damage is just going to be coming out. See, the damage was so big that he just got deleted. But anyway, see the tracking giving me some 12 damage ticks. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. Okay. And these engagements you can sort of kite away. I believe that I mess up in this one, so let's not use that one. But you can see what I'm kind of trying to do. I do get ganged up on by about 4 people here. But yeah, important, land your Lightning Strike early on. That way you have access to your increased damage. Okay, going into our next engagement. If you're in a Clash game, this is very, very good to make use of. I know that they're going to be across the way trying to loot up what they just destroyed here, so I'm making sure to take it over the top here. I have the fire offhand ready to go. Land down your Lightning Strike early and just let your lightning do its work. You can clean up with fire. This is a very good example. Okay, so this guy is unsuspecting. Perfect opportunity for me to stun him into some bigger damage. Lay down your lightning, and then let your lightning do the work. Even if he tries to make it up, it's not going to matter because you're going to be ahead of him. And at that point, I already saw from the engagement coming in that there's nobody around him. He is singled out. So I don't even have to worry about conserving my health too much. One of the easier examples of decision making that you can find. Okay, I'm going to be getting into another scenario. Okay, this will be a good one. So dropping in, my decision to drop in on these houses is that there is some high ground up here, and it gives me full view of this valley up here in the top right, and it gives me full view of the courtyard as well. So putting yourself in a good vantage point is going to be pretty important for deciding your positioning. Yes, this is Clash, but it does work out for Battle Royale as well. Okay, had a guy land on top of me, but he still doesn't know for some reason. I end up backing off because I want to make sure that people like this guy can't sneak up behind me. He's going to get stunned, and that's an easy one, okay? Again, keeping your ears open, like I said earlier. Just listen for this guy. Okay, you hear that? You saw the indicator? I don't even waste time. That guy that I'm chasing isn't even paying attention to me, and he has full health. This guy, on the other hand, is going to be chunking me down until I'm gone. So I quickly snap on him, making sure that he's not a threat anymore. He gets caught up and stunned, and that's the easiest exile that you'll ever come across. Okay, we have a little bit of flight going on. Lightning's great for flight. Right now I'm looking for this rock. This rock is the best thing to do. I put down the firewall to block the frost. And again, that's an easy exile if you play it right. Okay. Again, I'm going for the rock so that I'm free of stone shapers. And I know there's plenty of them because I see the flash from this shockwave. So I want to make sure I'm staying clear of that. Okay. This guy, as you can see, is charging up a frost. You can see it in his hand right here. So I'm going to be putting down my flame wall to try to protect my teammate. See? Right on time. Someone else puts down a lightning strike. He's leaning back, which means he is stunned. And it's an easy follow-up from there. There's absolutely nothing you can do. Okay, so I'm trying to help my teammates by going up on these slopes. Notice how... Look at my pathing here. Again, making good decisions. Look at my pathing here. I can choose to path on this flat ground to the right, on the flat ground in front of me, or I could go up the mountain where it's harder for stone shapers to get to me. And what do I end up doing? I'm on the slope, making sure that it's very, very hard for people to get to me. They can't just walk up. They have to burn mana. They have to use runes. Again, simple strategies will go a long way. From here, trying to land a quick little bit of damage. A little bit difficult to do. Oh, I see the frost. That guy over here, he's not engaging. The guy I was engaging earlier, he's not a threat. Now it's the frost guy. So I want to make sure I'm keeping my primary attention on him. Of course, I do get caught out by multiple people. And this is the beauty of this build. Okay, so I want you guys to pay attention to this. Okay, I put the firewall here to block off the frost guy. That way he is out of the fight. The guy I was attacking earlier actually gets a nice shot on me. My HP, as you can see in the bottom left of your screen, past the blur, is going to be 29 HP. And this guy, if you can see, has more than full shield and full health. But the beauty of this build is that if you space out your shots correctly, you can actually get some huge damage. Legendary Fire with Focus Mana and with Recklessness. Manage your mana well, and you're hitting 54 damage fireballs. Again, notice how I'm not using my mana. I'm not using levitation. I'm not wasting mana. I'm making sure to space out my shots, and I'm making sure to use the momentum from Spring Step itself so that it couples with both mixing up my movement and keeping my mana high. 54, 54, 54. Easy. Okay? Even at 29 HP, you can still turn a fight like that. Sorry about that. A little bit of noise from the clip. Of course, at this point, I am rather low. But same thing. Landing down my lightning strike. Same scenario. 29 HP, I lose 13 HP. It's all due to how do I take this fight, okay? So again, this will be the last one that I cover. As you saw in the previous fight, I turned a 160 HP to 0 without losing very much. I'm still at 29 HP when I start this fight, but the way that I take the fight and the decisions that I'm making makes this a lot easier. So real quick, early fireball to gauge where his health is at. It's full health, so immediately I know I need to keep my distance to make it harder for him to hit me. Okay, put down the lightning strike. And then you want to just zap him with your lightning if you're a conduit, or any sort of long range that you have. And then as soon as it gets close, you just let your fireballs go. Okay? Easy stuff. And guys, one last time, this will be the hollow code. It is make good decisions. Make good decisions. I'll type it in one more time for you guys. Make good decisions. Okay? So guys, that is going to be the end of this Spellbreak Academy series, or this Spellbreak Academy episode for Mastering Decision Making, I believe is the title. Mastering Decision Making. Hope you guys enjoyed, and hope you guys learned something today. Make sure that you are joining in the Element Discord. Make sure you're joining the Spellbreak Discord as well. I have the Element Discord pinned up at the very, very top. I am one of the main color casters. You'll see me out in the action here tomorrow. And also, we have some duos qualifiers going on today. You may recognize some names in there. I believe Crashy is duoing up with It's Your Boy Ross for nice little bit of competition. I'm not casting it, unfortunately, but I will be live viewing it here on this channel. Guys, thanks again. Big shout out to Proletariat and Element for letting me host this episode of Spellbreak Academy. Hope you guys all have a great day. Hope you guys learned something. And yeah, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel if you do feel so free. Y'all have a great day. Again, Holobot, make good decisions. Y'all have a great day.